Maid's 9-year-old daughter helps CEO upstairs before 4.5 Milho's deal. What happens next is incredible. If the title touched your heart, just imagine what's coming next. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us where you're watching from. Alexander Thompson stared at the handwritten, out-of-order sign taped crookedly across the elevator doors, his knuckles whitening as he gripped his crutch. The mahogany-paneled lobby of the Preston building stretched around him like a cathedral of missed opportunities, its marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers that seemed to mock his predicament. 13 floors, he muttered, checking his Rolex for the 5th time in 2 minutes, 11:47 a.m. The Meridian Industries meeting was scheduled for noon, and this deal, $4.5 million that would save Thompson Enterprises from the brink of bankruptcy, was slipping through his fingers like sand. His leg throbbed beneath the carbon fiber brace hidden under his tailored Armani pants. 6 months since the accident that shattered his femur in 3 places. 6 months of hiding his weakness from competitors who circled like vultures. 6 months of pretending that Alexander Thompson was still the invincible CEO who built a tech empire from nothing. The lobby's silence was broken only by the distant hum of a floor buffer somewhere deep in the building's corridors. Alex pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over his assistant's number. He could reschedule, make excuses, but Meridian's CEO, Harrison Cross, had been clear: today or never. Cross was flying to Tokyo tonight, and this was their only window. "Excuse me, mister, are you okay?" The voice was small, curious, and definitely not supposed to be in the Preston building's executive lobby. Alex turned, expecting to see a lost tourist or confused visitor, but instead found himself looking down at a little girl with dark curls escaping from 2 carefully braided pigtails. She wore a simple yellow dress that had seen better days, her small hands clutching a worn paperback book against her chest. She couldn't have been more than 9 years old, with intelligent brown eyes that seemed far too knowing for her age. Those eyes were studying him with the kind of direct honesty that adults had long since learned to disguise. "I'm fine," Alex said automatically, though his tone lacked conviction. He glanced around the lobby, searching for whoever was supposed to be watching this child. "Where are your parents?" "My mama's working," the girl said simply, tilting her head. "You look sad and worried. Are you hurt?" Her gaze dropped to his crutch, with the matter-of-fact acceptance that only children possessed. Alex felt heat rise in his cheeks. He'd spent months perfecting the art of concealing his injury, of standing and walking in ways that minimized its visibility. Yet this child had seen through it all in seconds. "I had an accident," he found himself saying, though he couldn't explain why he was offering personal information to a stranger's child. "I'm just having trouble with the elevator being broken." "Oh." The girl's face lit up with sudden understanding. "You need to get upstairs, but the stairs are hard with your crutch. Mama always says the stairs are good exercise, but I guess they're not so good when you're hurt." 13 floors, Alex said, more to himself than to her. "I have an important meeting and I can't—" "I could help you," the girl interrupted, her voice bright with the confidence of youth. "I'm really good at stairs. I live on the 4th floor of our building, and the elevator's always broken there too. I go up and down them like 100 times a day." Alex blinked. "Help me?" "Sure. I could carry your briefcase, or help you balance, or even just talk to you so you don't feel so lonely going up. Mama says talking makes everything easier." She paused, studying his face with that unnervingly direct gaze. "Plus, I bet you're really strong. You just need someone to believe in you." For a moment, Alexander Thompson, Harvard MBA, Forbes 30 under 30, CEO of a company he'd built from a dorm room startup, found himself speechless. When was the last time someone had offered to help him without wanting something in return? When was the last time anyone had looked at him and seen strength instead of limitation? "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been in months. "Grace Santos," she said, extending a small hand with the formality of a business executive. "What's yours?" "Alexander. Alex." He shook her tiny hand, surprised by the firm confidence of her grip. "Grace, that's very kind of you to offer, but I couldn't ask a child to—" "You didn't ask," Grace pointed out with a grin that transformed her entire face. "I offered. There's a difference. Besides, I'm not just any child. I'm 9 3/4, and I've been helping people my whole life. It's what Mama taught me." Alex glanced at his watch again. 11:52 a.m., 8 minutes to somehow get 13 floors up and compose himself for the most important meeting of his professional life. The sensible thing would be to call and reschedule, to admit defeat and pray for another opportunity that might never come. But something in Grace's eager expression, something in the way she stood there ready to take on the world for a stranger, made him reconsider. 13 floors is a lot, he said carefully. "Then we better get started," Grace declared, already moving toward the stairwell door. She pulled it open with both hands, the heavy metal door requiring all her strength. "Come on, Alex. You can do this. I believe in you." And somehow, in that moment, with those words from a 9-year-old girl he'd met 5 minutes ago, Alexander Thompson began to believe in himself too. The stairwell was sterile and cold, fluorescent lights humming overhead as their footsteps echoed off concrete walls. Grace had insisted on carrying his leather briefcase, though it was almost as big as she was, and she clutched it protectively as they began their ascent. "So what kind of meeting do you have?" she asked as they reached the second-floor landing, barely breathing hard, while Alex already felt his leg protesting. "A business meeting," Alex said, focusing on placing each step carefully. "Very important business." "What kind of business?" "Mama cleans offices for lots of different businesses. Some people sell things, some people make things, some people just sit around and look important." Grace giggled at her own observation. "Which kind are you?" Despite his pain and time pressure, Alex found himself smiling. "A little bit of all three, I guess. My company makes software, computer programs that help other businesses run better." "Oh, like apps? I love apps. There's this one game where you have to match colored gems," and Grace stopped herself, looking embarrassed. "Sorry. Mama says I talk too much when I get excited." "Your mama's wrong," Alex said, surprised by his own sincerity. "I like hearing you talk. It's refreshing." They climbed in comfortable silence for a few floors, Grace occasionally offering observations about the building. "Did you know there are exactly 27 steps between each floor?" Or asking gentle questions that somehow never felt intrusive. She seemed to have an instinct for when he needed to rest, pausing at landings to check the view through small windows that showed nothing but other buildings. "Alex?" Grace's voice was thoughtful as they approached the 7th floor. "Yeah? Why are you scared?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "What makes you think I'm scared?" "You keep checking your watch and your hands shake a little when you think I'm not looking. Plus, you're breathing like Mama does when she's worried about paying rent." Grace's voice was matter-of-fact, without judgment. "It's okay to be scared. Mama says being scared just means something matters to you." Alex stopped climbing, leaning against the handrail as he looked at this remarkable child. "Your mama sounds very wise." "She is. She works really hard and never complains, even when things are tough. She says courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what you need to do, even when you are afraid." Grace shifted his briefcase to her other arm. "So what are you afraid of?" The honest answer was everything. He was afraid of losing his company, of disappointing his employees, of proving his competitors right about his weakness. He was afraid that this injury had changed him fundamentally, that he'd never again be the man who'd built an empire through sheer determination and will. But looking into Grace's earnest brown eyes, he found himself giving a different kind of honest answer. "I'm afraid I'm not strong enough anymore," he said quietly. "This meeting, if it doesn't go well, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, people who trusted me, who believed in me, and I'm not sure I can carry that weight anymore." Grace considered this seriously, then nodded. "That is scary. But you know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're already carrying it. You're here, aren't you? Climbing 13 floors with a hurt leg because you won't give up on those people. That sounds pretty strong to me." Something loosened in Alex's chest, a tension he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. "How did you get so wise, Grace Santos?" "I watch people," she said simply, "and I listen. Most grown-ups forget how to do both." She started climbing again, calling over her shoulder, "Come on, strong Alex. We're more than halfway there." By the 10th floor, Alex's leg was screaming, and sweat had begun to bead along his hairline despite the stairwell's chill. Grace, meanwhile, seemed to have gained energy as they climbed, chattering about school, her favorite books, and the cat that lived in her apartment building's alley. "Mr. Whiskers, that's the cat. He's orange and has one eye. But he's the smartest cat ever. He knows which apartments will give him food and which ones to avoid. Mama says he's got street smarts." Grace paused on the landing, pretending to admire the view, while Alex caught his breath. "Do you have any pets?" "No," Alex said, thinking of his sterile penthouse apartment with its designer furniture and complete lack of anything resembling warmth or life. "I travel too much for work. That's sad. Everyone needs someone to take care of." Grace's voice held that matter-of-fact wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. "Even if it's just a plant or something." "What about you, besides Mr. Whiskers?" "I take care of Mama," Grace said simply. "She works so hard, sometimes she forgets to eat or sleep. I make sure she drinks water and remind her to take her vitamins. And I read to her when she's tired. She likes mystery books the best." The casual way Grace talked about caring for her mother sent another pang through Alex's chest. When was the last time he'd taken care of anyone but himself? When was the last time anyone had taken care of him? "Tell me more about your mama," Alex found himself saying, genuinely curious about the woman who had raised such an extraordinary child. Grace's face brightened immediately. "She's the most beautiful woman in the world," she said, with the absolute certainty of a child's love. "She has long, dark hair that curls at the ends when it's humid, and she always smells like vanilla because she uses this special lotion. Her hands are always warm, even in winter." Alex found himself smiling at the vivid picture Grace was painting. "She sounds wonderful." "She is, and she's so smart, Alex. She can fix anything. Our toaster, my bike, even our neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez's radio. She speaks 3 languages and reads everything she can get her hands on. Sometimes I find her studying these big, heavy books about business and accounting late at night when she thinks I'm asleep." "Business and accounting?" "Or she wants to have her own cleaning company someday," Grace said with obvious pride, "not just working for other people, but being the boss. She says if you're going to clean offices, you might as well own the business that does it." Her expression grew thoughtful. "I think she'd be really good at it. She notices everything, and she cares about doing things right." 11th floor, Grace announced, bouncing slightly on her toes. 2 more to go. How are you feeling?" "Honestly?" Like his leg might give out entirely, like the steel rod in his femur was trying to work its way out through his skin, like the 6 months of physical therapy had been a waste of time and money. But Grace was looking at him with such confidence, such absolute faith in his ability to make it to the top, that he found strength he didn't know he still possessed. "I'm feeling like I can make it," he said, and meant it. "Of course you can. You're the strongest person I've met today. Grace started up the next flight, his briefcase bumping against her leg with each step. Alex, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you have someone special, like a wife or a girlfriend? The question was asked with the innocent curiosity of a child, but Alex found himself pausing. No, he said simply. I've been too focused on work to really connect with anyone that way. That's sad, Grace said matter-of-factly. Mama doesn't have anyone special either, but she always says she's too busy taking care of me to worry about romance. I think she's lonely sometimes, though. I catch her watching romantic movies when she thinks I'm doing homework, and she gets this wistful look on her face. The image of Grace's mother, this woman he'd never met but was already intrigued by, watching romantic movies alone after putting her daughter to bed, struck Alex as both heartbreaking and endearing. Why is this meeting so important? Grace asked, changing the subject as they reached the 12th floor. I mean, I know you said it's about jobs and stuff, but there's something else, isn't there? Alex considered deflecting, giving her the sanitized version he'd perfected for investors and board members. But Grace had earned honesty, and somehow he found himself telling the truth. 3 years ago, I thought I was invincible, he began, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. My company was growing fast, I was making deals left and right, and I thought nothing could stop me. Then I made some bad decisions, trusted the wrong people, and everything started falling apart. They reached the 12th floor, and Alex paused, both from physical necessity and because the words were harder to say than he'd expected. The accident happened while I was rushing to fix one of those mistakes. I was driving too fast in bad weather, thinking I could control everything, including physics. He laughed bitterly, spent 3 months in the hospital, and when I came back, vultures were circling my company. Investors pulled out, clients cancelled contracts, competitors started poaching my best employees. That's awful, Grace said softly, but you're still fighting. That has to count for something. This deal with Meridian Industries is our last chance. If I can close it, we survive. If not... He shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant about the potential destruction of everything he'd built. Then we better make sure you close it, Grace said with the fierce determination of a general preparing for battle. What do you need to do to make them say yes? The question was so direct, so practical, that Alex found himself smiling despite everything. Convince them that my software can increase their efficiency by 30% and save them millions in operational costs over the next 5 years. Can it? Yes, absolutely. The data is solid, the projections are conservative, and our beta testing exceeded every benchmark. Alex's voice grew stronger as he talked about his company, his passion evident. But Meridian's CEO, Harrison Cross, is old school. He makes decisions based on gut instinct as much as data, and he's known for walking away from deals if he doesn't trust the person making the pitch. So you need him to trust you, Grace summarized. That's not so hard. You're trustworthy. How can you possibly know that? Grace stopped climbing and turned to face him, her expression serious. Because you're here. Because when you could have given up and rescheduled, you chose to climb 13 floors with a hurt leg rather than let people down. Because you've been honest with me even though I'm just a kid and you could have blown me off. Because... She paused, searching for the right words. Because you have kind eyes. I mean, people don't have kind eyes. They stood on the 12th floor landing, Alex looking down at this extraordinary child who somehow saw the best in him when he could barely see it in himself. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and somewhere far below, he could hear the distant sound of voices and elevator music from other floors. Grace, he said quietly, I want you to know that meeting you today, it's been the best thing that's happened to me in months. Really? Her face lit up with pure joy. That's so nice. Meeting you has been really good for me too. I don't get to help grown-ups very often. Mama usually does all the helping in our family. Now where's your mama anyway? You said she was working. She cleans offices in this building, probably on one of the floors we already passed. Grace's voice was cheerful, but Alex caught something underneath, a flicker of worry perhaps, or embarrassment. Which company does she work for? Grace shifted the briefcase to her other arm, not quite meeting his eyes. Different ones, I think. She has a lot of clients. Something in her tone made Alex pay closer attention, but before he could ask another question, Grace was already heading up the final flight of stairs. "Come on, Alex. One more floor, and you'll be at your meeting. You're going to do great. I just know it." The 13th floor felt like conquering Everest. Alex's leg was beyond pain now, operating on pure adrenaline and determination, but he'd made it. Grace pushed open the stairwell door with both hands, revealing a hallway lined with frosted glass doors bearing various company names in elegant gold lettering. "Meridian Industries," Grace read from a door halfway down the hall. "That's you, right?" "That's me." Alex checked his watch. 12:02 p.m. 2 minutes late, but given the circumstances, practically a miracle. Grace carefully set down his briefcase and straightened his tie with the solicitous care of a mother sending her child off to school. "You look very professional and important," she declared. "Mr. Cross is going to love your software thingy." Grace. Alex found himself struggling for words. How do you thank a child for giving you back your confidence? How do you express gratitude for a gift you didn't even know you needed? "You don't have to say anything," Grace said, seeming to read his thoughts. "Just go in there and be your awesome self. And Alex, yeah? Remember what I said about being strong? You already are. You just forgot for a little while." She stood on her tiptoes and hugged him quickly, her small arms barely reaching around his waist, then stepped back with a grin. "Now go get 'em, Tiger." Doom. As Alex walked toward the Meridian Industries door, briefcase in hand and his leg somehow not feeling quite as painful as it had moments before, he turned back to thank Grace once more. But the hallway was empty. She'd vanished as quietly as she'd appeared, leaving only the faint scent of strawberry shampoo and the echo of her encouraging words. Alex straightened his shoulders, took a deep breath and knocked on the door. But as he waited for someone to answer, his mind wasn't just on the coming presentation. It was on a little girl with wise eyes and a mother who watched romantic movies alone at night, dreaming of running her own business. "Mr. Thompson." Harrison Cross's voice boomed across the Meridian Industries conference room as Alex entered. "We were starting to wonder if you'd gotten lost." Cross was exactly as Alex had pictured him, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the kind of commanding presence that filled a room. He sat at the head of a polished mahogany table, surrounded by 3 other executives, all of whom looked up from their tablets and phones, with expressions ranging from mild interest to barely concealed impatience. "My apologies for the delay," Alex said, settling into the chair across from Cross with only the slightest wince. "The elevator was out of service, and I had to take the stairs." 13 floors, Cross raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a commitment to punctuality. This meeting was worth the climb." Something in Alex's tone must have registered, because Cross leaned forward slightly, his full attention now focused on the younger man. "Well then, Mr. Thompson, let's see if your software is worth the effort you put into getting here." For the next 45 minutes, Alex delivered the presentation of his life. Every slide was crisp, every statistic memorized, every potential objection anticipated and addressed. This was the final approval meeting after months of negotiations, technical reviews, and due diligence. Today was about closing the deal, not selling the concept. But more than the technical perfection, there was something different in his delivery, a confidence that hadn't been there in months, a passion that reminded him why he'd started this company in the first place. Grace's words echoed in his mind as he spoke about efficiency improvements and cost savings, her belief in his strength giving weight to every argument he made. "The beta testing results speak for themselves," Alex concluded, pulling up the final slide. 32% efficiency improvement, with implementation costs recovered within 18 months. But beyond the numbers, what we're offering is transformation, the ability to streamline operations in ways that seemed impossible just 5 years ago. Cross had been silent throughout most of the presentation, occasionally jotting notes, but mostly just watching Alex with those sharp grey eyes. Now he leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Impressive work, Mr. Thompson. The technology is certainly sound, and your projections appear conservative rather than optimistic." He paused, and Alex felt his heart rate spike. "But I have to ask, why should we trust you to deliver on these promises?" The question Alex had been dreading, the one that cut straight to the heart of his vulnerability. 6 months ago, he would have bristled, launched into a recitation of his credentials and past successes. Today, with Grace's words still echoing in his ears, he chose a different approach. "Because I know what it's like to fail," Alex said quietly, "and I know what it's like to rebuild from that failure. My company went through a very difficult period over the past year. We made mistakes, lost clients, had to rebuild our reputation from the ground up. But that experience taught us something invaluable: how to create systems that don't just work when everything's going perfectly, but that remain stable when tested by real-world pressures." Cross's expression didn't change, but Alex caught the slight nod from the executive to his left. "The software we're proposing isn't theoretical. It's been battle-tested by a company that was fighting for its survival. Every efficiency we're promising has been proven under the most demanding circumstances possible." Alex met Cross's gaze directly. "I won't promise you that implementation will be flawless or that there won't be challenges. But I will promise you that we've learned how to face those challenges and emerge stronger." The room fell silent. Cross exchanged glances with his team, then returned his attention to Alex. "That's remarkably honest, Mr. Thompson. Most salespeople would have tried to convince me they've never failed at anything." "Failure teaches you things that success never can," Alex replied. "And frankly, Mr. Cross, you're too experienced to believe in fairy tales. You want a partner who's proven they can handle adversity, not one who's never been tested." Cross smiled for the first time since the meeting began. "Indeed." He looked around the table, noting the subtle approval on his colleagues' faces. "Well, Mr. Thompson, you've given us quite a bit to consider. We'll need to discuss this internally, of course, and review the technical specifications with our IT department." Alex's heart sank. The corporate kiss-off, delivered with professional courtesy, but finality nonetheless. "However," Cross continued, and Alex's attention snapped back, "I've been in this business for 30 years, and I've learned to trust my instincts about people as much as data about products." He stood, extending his hand across the table. "Congratulations, Mr. Thompson. You've got yourself a deal." The words took several seconds to register. When they did, Alex felt a wave of relief so profound it was almost dizzying. Thank you, Mr. Cross. I won't let you down." "I believe that," Cross said, his handshake firm and warm. "Sarah will work out the contract details with your legal team. We'd like to begin implementation within the month." As Alex gathered his materials and exchanged business cards with the Meridian team, his mind was already racing ahead to everything this deal would mean. Jobs saved, investors reassured, his company's future secured. But more than that, it meant he'd proven to himself that he could still do this, that the accident hadn't fundamentally changed who he was. He was so focused on his phone, texting his assistant about the successful meeting, that he didn't notice the woman in cleaning coveralls until he nearly walked into her. She was emptying wastebaskets in the hallway, her long, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and when she looked up, Alex felt his breath catch. Grace hadn't exaggerated. Her mother was beautiful, not in the polished, artificial way of the women Alex usually encountered in his social circle, but with a natural grace that made the fluorescent hallway lighting seem warm. Her brown eyes held the same intelligence he'd noticed in Grace, but there was something else there too, a wariness born of years of being invisible to people like him. "Oh, excuse me," she said quickly, stepping aside. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to be in your way." "No problem at all," Alex replied, but he found himself not moving past her. Something about her voice, her face. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" The woman looked confused, and Alex caught a flash of concern cross her features. "I don't think so, sir. I'm Maria Santos. I clean the offices here." Santos. Alex's mind raced, and suddenly he understood why Grace had looked uncomfortable when he'd asked about her mother's work. "Do you have a daughter? A little girl named Grace?" Maria's expression changed instantly, worry replacing confusion. "Yes, Grace is my daughter. Why? Is she in trouble?" "She was supposed to wait in the lobby while I finished my route." "She's not in trouble," Alex said quickly. "Quite the opposite, actually. He paused, trying to figure out how to explain what had happened without sounding completely insane. "She helped me today. When the elevator was broken, she helped me get to my meeting." "She what?" Maria's voice was sharp with concern. "Sir, I'm so sorry if she bothered you. Grace can be very forward sometimes. She doesn't understand that not everyone wants to talk to a 9-year-old. "Mrs. Santos," Alex said firmly, struck by how different Maria's voice sounded when she was worried, softer, with just a hint of an accent she normally kept carefully controlled. "Your daughter didn't bother me. She saved me." Maria stared at him, clearly not understanding. Alex looked around the hallway, noting they were alone, then made a decision that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. "Could we talk? Maybe grab a coffee? I'd like to tell you about what your daughter did today, and, well, there's something I'd like to discuss with you." Maria glanced at her watch, then at her cleaning cart. "I still have 3 more floors to finish, and my supervisor—" "What if I told you that your supervisor wouldn't be a problem?" Alex interrupted gently. "What if I told you that you might not need to worry about cleaning schedules for much longer?" Something in his tone made Maria look at him more carefully, and Alex could see the moment she registered his expensive suit, his confident bearing, the Rolex on his wrist. But more than that, he saw her really look at his face, and he watched her take in his genuine expression, the warmth in his eyes when he mentioned Grace. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. "My name is Alexander Thompson. I'm the CEO of Thompson Enterprises." He paused, watching recognition dawn in her eyes. "And thanks to your daughter, I just closed the biggest deal of my career." Maria's hand went to her throat, a gesture so graceful it made Alex's chest tighten. You're my boss?" "I'm the man whose life your daughter changed today," Alex said, his voice warm with something that felt suspiciously like more than gratitude. "And if you'll let me buy you a cup of coffee, I'd like to change yours." Maria Santos stared at the man in front of her, this powerful CEO who somehow knew her daughter's name, who was speaking to her with respect rather than the polite dismissal she was used to from building executives. For a moment, she couldn't speak. "Grace helped you," she finally managed. "More than helped. She reminded me who I could be when I'd forgotten." Alex gestured toward the elevator bank, where a maintenance worker was installing new control panels. "The elevator was broken. I had a crucial meeting, and I was about to give up. Grace convinced me I could climb 13 floors on these." He indicated his crutch with a rueful smile. "But more than that, she talked to me like I was worth talking to. She saw strength in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Mrs. Santos, your daughter has a gift, not just for kindness, but for seeing what people need to hear exactly when they need to hear it." Maria's eyes filled with tears, and Alex found himself wanting to reach out and comfort her, though he held himself back. "She's always been like that. Even as a tiny girl, she'd comfort other children when they were crying, share her toys even when she barely had any. She wiped her eyes quickly. I try to teach her to be careful around strangers, but she has such a big heart. Thank goodness she does, Alex said softly, because that big heart just saved my company and probably about 50 jobs. They stood in the hallway for a moment, and Alex found himself studying Maria's face, the way her eyebrows drew together when she was thinking, the graceful curve of her neck, the way she unconsciously tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was nervous. He'd been around beautiful women before, but there was something about Maria that was different. Maybe it was the way she held herself with dignity despite her work uniform, or the protective love that blazed in her eyes when she talked about Grace. Mrs. Santos, Maria, I meant what I said about that coffee and about changing your life. Would you be willing to trust me for 1 hour? Maria looked at her cleaning cart, then at this man who spoke about her daughter with such genuine warmth and gratitude. Something in his eyes reminded her of Grace, that same earnest honesty that couldn't be faked. And underneath that, something else that made her pulse quicken in a way it hadn't in years. Okay, she said quietly, 1 hour. As they walked toward the elevator, now functioning perfectly with its shiny new control panel, neither of them noticed the small figure watching from the stairwell door. Grace Santos smiled to herself, hugged her worn paperback a little tighter, and quietly slipped back down the stairs. Some miracles, she thought, were worth climbing 13 floors to create, and some miracles were just beginning. The coffee shop on the ground floor of the Preston building buzzed with afternoon conversation, but Alex barely noticed the ambient noise. Across from him, Maria Santos sat with her hands wrapped around a steaming mug, her cleaning uniform somehow managing to look dignified in the warm lighting. She'd let her hair down from its practical ponytail, and Alex found himself mesmerized by the way it caught the afternoon light. I never expected to be sitting across from a CEO, Maria said quietly, a nervous smile playing at her lips. When Grace was little, she used to say she wanted to meet a real prince someday. I guess she got her wish. Trust me, I'm no prince, Alex replied, stirring sugar into his coffee, while stealing glances at the way Maria's eyes crinkled when she smiled. 6 months ago, I was driving my car into a tree because I was too proud to slow down in an ice storm. Maria studied his face with the same directness he'd noticed in Grace, but there was something else in her gaze now, a warmth that made Alex's pulse quicken. Grace mentioned you were hurt. She has a way of seeing past what people try to hide. She does. It's remarkable. Alex leaned forward, drawn by the genuine interest in Maria's expression. Maria, I want to talk to you about Grace's future, and yours. Mr. Thompson, Alex, please. He pulled out his phone, showing her the confirmation email from Meridian Industries. As she read, Alex found himself studying the delicate curve of her jawline, the way her lips parted slightly in surprise. This deal your daughter helped me close today. It's worth $4.5 million. It literally saved my company. Maria's eyes widened. I don't understand what this has to do with us. Grace has something special. Intelligence, yes, but more than that. Emotional intelligence, the ability to read people and situations that can't be taught. Alex paused, trying not to get distracted by the way Maria unconsciously bit her lower lip when thinking. I'd like to set up an education fund for Grace, full scholarships through college, maybe graduate school. The best schools, the best opportunities. Maria set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. That's incredibly generous, but I can't possibly accept. You can, and you should. Not for my sake, but for hers. Alex's voice was gentle but firm, and he had to resist the urge to reach across the table and take her trembling hands. Maria, how much does Grace know about your financial situation? The question hit its mark. Maria's composure cracked slightly, and Alex saw the exhaustion she'd been hiding. The weight of working multiple jobs, of stretching every dollar. In that moment of vulnerability, she looked so achingly beautiful that Alex felt something shift permanently in his chest. "She knows we have to be careful with money," Maria said finally, "but I try to protect her from the worst of it. She's still a child, and she should get to be a child who doesn't worry about college or whether her mother is working herself into the ground." Alex did reach across the table then, his fingers brushing against hers. The spark of electricity that shot through him at the contact made his breath catch. "Maria, I'm not trying to buy your family. I'm trying to say thank you in the only way that matters, by making sure her future is as bright as her spirit." Tears spilled down Maria's cheeks, and Alex had to grip the table edge to keep from reaching up to wipe them away. "You don't understand. Grace and we've always just had each other. I've worked so hard to take care of her, to be enough for her. If you do this, what does that say about me as a mother? It says you raised a daughter so extraordinary that she can change a stranger's life in 30 minutes, Alex said firmly, his voice thick with emotion that had everything to do with the woman sitting across from him. It says you instilled kindness and courage in her despite having every reason to be bitter. Maria, you didn't fail Grace. You created a miracle." The cafe seemed to fade as Maria struggled with emotions she'd kept buried for years. Alex found himself memorizing every detail of her face. The way her dark eyelashes cast shadows on her cheeks, the full curve of her lips that he was having increasingly inappropriate thoughts about. "Grace's father left when she was 2, Maria whispered, said he couldn't handle the responsibility, that he was too young to be tied down. I was 21, working as a waitress, living in a studio apartment that cost more than I made most months. But you didn't give up." "I couldn't. She was mine, you know." Maria's voice grew stronger, and Alex found himself falling deeper in love with her fierce maternal devotion. "Every night I'd look at her sleeping and promise her that somehow, someday, I'd give her everything she deserved. I've been working toward that promise for 7 years." The way she said it, with such conviction, such pure love, made Alex's heart clench. When was the last time he'd felt that kind of passionate commitment to anything beyond his company? "If I let you do this," Maria continued, "am I admitting I failed?" You're admitting you love her enough to accept help when it comes from the right place," Alex said, and this time he did take her hand fully in his, ignoring the way his skin seemed to burn at the contact. "Maria, what I'm offering comes with no conditions, no expectations, no strings." They sat in silence, Maria's hand still in his, both acutely aware of the connection sparking between them. Alex found himself wondering what it would be like to really know this woman, not just as Grace's mother, but as Maria. "There's something else," Maria said quietly, and Alex noticed she didn't pull her hand away. "Something I haven't told Grace." Alex waited, his thumb unconsciously stroking across her knuckles. "Her father. His name was David Thompson. He was studying business at the university when we met." Maria's voice was steady, but Alex could see the cost of these words. "I don't know if it's a coincidence, if maybe you're related somehow." The coffee cup slipped from Alex's other hand, hitting the table with a sharp clink. The warm feeling in his chest turned to ice as pieces of a puzzle began falling into place. "David Thompson," he repeated slowly, his hand tightening around Maria's. 21 years old, about 9 years ago." Maria nodded, her face pale. "You know him?" "He's my younger brother." Alex's voice was hoarse with shock. "Maria, David is my brother." The revelation hung between them like a live wire. Alex's mind raced backward through time, trying to remember David's college years. There had been talk of a girlfriend, someone serious, but David had been secretive. Then suddenly it was over. He never mentioned. Alex began, then stopped. Of course David hadn't mentioned it. His brother had always been the irresponsible one, the charmer who avoided consequences. But now, looking at Maria's stricken face, Alex felt a rage building that had everything to do with the fact that his brother had abandoned this incredible woman. "Grace doesn't know," Maria said quickly, trying to pull her hand away. Alex held on. "I mean, she knows her father's name, but she's never asked questions about his family. I've always told her that some people aren't ready to be parents." "It's not," Alex said firmly, though his voice was tight with anger at his brother. "Maria, this changes nothing about what I offered. If anything, it makes it more important." "How can you say that?" Maria did pull her hand away then, and Alex felt the loss of contact like a physical ache. "This is your niece we're talking about, your brother's daughter. This isn't charity anymore. This is family obligation, and I'm just the woman your brother got pregnant and abandoned." The way she said it, with such painful self-deprecation, made Alex want to reach across the table and shake her. "No," he said, his voice low and fierce. "You are the woman who raised my niece to be the most remarkable person I've encountered in years. You were the woman who instilled kindness and wisdom in a child, despite having every reason to be bitter. You are the woman who worked multiple jobs and sacrificed everything to give her daughter the best life possible." His voice softened, filled with something that was definitely more than admiration. "And you are the woman who, in the space of one conversation, has made me remember what it feels like to want to take care of someone other than myself." Maria's breath caught, and Alex saw his own feelings reflected in her dark eyes. The shock of unexpected attraction, the confusion of timing, the impossibility of their situation. "Alex," she whispered, and the way she said his name made him want to lean across the table and kiss her. "Grace is my niece," he said. "She's my blood, my family, and she's been struggling financially while I've been sitting in my penthouse feeling sorry for myself. That ends today." "Alex, no, Maria, listen to me." "Oh." David may be Grace's biological father, but he forfeited any claim to that title when he walked away. "You've been her father and mother for 8 years, but if you'll let me, I'd like to be her uncle. The uncle who shows up, who cares, who makes sure she knows she has family, who will never abandon her." Tears were streaming down Maria's face now. "She's going to be so happy. Grace has always wanted a big family." "Then let's make those stories come true," Alex said, his own eyes bright. "Starting with Thanksgiving. I have a house in Connecticut that's way too big for one person, and I make a terrible turkey, but I'd love to have you both there." "You really mean this?" Maria said. "I've never meant anything more in my life." Alex pulled out his business card and wrote something on the back, his hand shaking slightly. "This is my personal number. I want you to call me if you need anything. And Maria?" "Yes?" She took the card, their fingers brushing again. "I want to know everything about Grace. What she likes, what she dreams about, what makes her laugh. I have 8 years of being an uncle to make up for." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "And I want to know everything about you too. Not just as Grace's mother, but as Maria. The woman who watches romantic movies alone at night and dreams of running her own business." The air between them crackled with unspoken possibility. Maria's cheeks flushed pink, and Alex could see her pulse beating rapidly at the base of her throat. "Alex, she began. But whatever she was going to say was interrupted by Grace appearing at their table with the sudden materialization that seemed to be her specialty. "Mama, Alex!" Grace's face was radiant with joy as she looked between them, and Alex had the uncomfortable feeling that she'd been watching them for longer than either realized. "Are you having a good talk?" "Yes, sweetheart," Maria said, quickly composing herself, though her cheeks remained pink. "Alex has some wonderful news about your future." "Ndifum." As Alex explained about the education fund and his desire to be Grace's uncle, He caught Maria watching him with an expression that made his heart race. There was gratitude there, yes, but also something warmer, something that suggested the attraction he felt wasn't entirely one-sided. When Grace threw her arms around his neck in an enthusiastic hug, Alex met Maria's eyes over her daughter's head. The look that passed between them was full of promise and possibility, complicated by family obligations, but undeniably real. The next morning brought October sunshine that made New York City look like a postcard, but David Thompson felt none of its warmth as he sat in his Audi outside Alex's penthouse building. He'd been sitting there for 30 minutes, trying to work up courage to go inside. The image from yesterday wouldn't leave his mind. Alex and Maria together, the intimate way they'd been leaning toward each other across that cafe table, the obvious connection sparking between them, and Grace, his daughter, looking at Alex with hero worship. The phone call to Alex's assistant had been easy enough, a casual request for breakfast with his brother. Alex had been surprised but pleased, suggesting they meet at his apartment rather than a restaurant. David had agreed, knowing privacy was exactly what he needed. The elevator ride to the top floor seemed to take forever. When Alex opened the door, he was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, a cup of coffee in his hand, and a smile that David hadn't seen in months. There was something different about his brother, a lightness, an energy that reminded David of the old Alex. "Dave, this is a nice surprise. Come in." "Come." Alex stepped aside, gesturing toward the sprawling living room. "Coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "Sure," David said, following his brother into the kitchen. The apartment was expensive, pristine, and completely impersonal. Though today, David noticed small changes. Fresh flowers on the counter, a children's book on the coffee table, a woman's cardigan draped over a chair. "So, what brings you by?" Alex asked, pouring coffee and handing it to his younger brother. "Not that I'm complaining, we don't see each other nearly enough." David took a sip to buy himself time, studying Alex's face. His brother looked different somehow, more relaxed than he'd seemed in months. There was a lightness that David couldn't quite place, and he had the unsettling realization that Alex looked like a man who'd found something worth fighting for. "I wanted to talk to you about something," David began carefully. "Something important." "Okay." Alex leaned against the kitchen counter, giving David his full attention. "What's on your mind?" "I heard you closed the Meridian deal yesterday. Congratulations, that's huge for the company." "Thanks. It was touch and go for a while, but it worked out." Alex's smile widened, and David caught something in his expression, a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Actually, I had some unexpected help getting to that meeting. You'll never believe what happened." David's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "The elevator was broken at the Preston building, and I was stuck on the ground floor with my crutch, 13 floors to climb, and no time to reschedule." Alex shook his head, still seeming amazed. "Then this little girl appeared, couldn't have been more than 9 years old, and offered to help me up the stairs." "A little girl?" David's voice came out hoarse. "Grace Santos. Remarkable kid, Dave, wise beyond her years, incredibly kind, with this way of seeing right through people's defenses." Alex's expression grew warm with genuine affection, and David felt a stab of jealousy. "She basically talked me through my fear and self-doubt, helped me find the confidence I needed. I probably would have given up and left if not for her." David set down his coffee cup carefully. "Santos, you said?" "Yeah. Her mother, Maria, works as a cleaner in the building. And Dave." Alex paused, his expression growing serious, and David braced himself. There's something incredible about this whole situation. "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Grace is our niece, and Maria." Alex's voice took on a quality David had never heard before. Protective, possessive, and unmistakably infatuated. Maria is the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. The words hit David like a physical blow. He gripped the counter edge to steady himself as he processed what Alex had just said. Not just that he'd found them, but the way he'd said Maria's name, like it was something precious. "What do you mean?" he managed. "Maria told me yesterday. Grace's father is David Thompson. You, Dave, this little girl who helped me save my company, is your daughter. And her mother." Alex's voice softened. "Her mother is someone I'm falling in love with." Alex was watching David's face carefully now, and David could see the exact moment his brother registered his reaction, or rather his lack of surprise about Grace, and his obvious shock about the rest. "You already knew about Grace," Alex said quietly. David closed his eyes, the weight of 8 years of secrets suddenly too heavy to bear. "Yes, I knew." The silence that followed was deafening. When David opened his eyes, Alex was staring at him with disappointment so profound it was almost physical, mixed with something that looked like protective fury. "You knew you had a daughter and you never told me," Alex said slowly. "You knew there was a child out there who shared our blood, and you said nothing. You knew Maria was struggling to raise her alone, and you did nothing. Alex, let me explain." "Explain what? Explain how you could walk away from a 2-year-old child. Explain how you could let Maria struggle as a single mother for 8 years while you were traveling the world. Explain how you could abandon a woman like Maria." The way Alex said her name, with such reverence, such obvious feeling, made David's stomach twist with jealousy. "It wasn't supposed to happen," David said weakly. "Maria and I, we were kids, Alex. I was 21, still in college, not ready for any kind of responsibility. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked." "So you ran." "I offered to pay for other options," David said, unable to meet his brother's eyes. "But Maria said she wanted to keep the baby. I told her I couldn't be a father, that I wasn't ready, and she said she understood. We agreed it would be better if I wasn't involved." "Better for who? For you?" Alex's voice was getting louder now. "Because it sure as hell wasn't better for Grace. And it wasn't better for Maria. You don't understand what it was like? Then explain it to me." Alex slammed his coffee mug down on the counter. "Explain to me how you could know that child existed and never once check to see if she was okay. Explain to me how you could walk away from Maria." The last part was said with such intensity that David felt his breath catch. This wasn't just about Grace anymore. This was about Maria and the way Alex clearly felt about her. David felt tears burning behind his eyes, years of suppressed guilt finally breaking through his defenses. "Because I was scared, okay? I was terrified that if I got involved, I'd screw it up, I'd hurt them worse than just staying away." "You don't know what it's like to be the family screw-up, Alex." "Are you kidding me?" Alex's laugh was bitter. "Dave, I nearly lost everything this year. The company, my reputation, my sense of who I am. I've been failing spectacularly for months. That's different. That's business. This was a child, my child, and a woman David stopped, realizing what he'd almost said. "A woman you what?" Alex's voice was dangerously quiet. "A woman I cared about," David finished quietly. "A woman I thought I loved. But I was too young and selfish to know what that meant." The admission hung in the air between them. Alex stared at his brother, processing this new information, and David could see the moment when protective instinct overrode everything else. "If you cared about her, why did you leave?" Alex asked. "Because I was 21, and stupid, and scared. And I thought if I really loved her, I'd know how to be what she needed, and when I didn't." David shrugged helplessly. "I convinced myself she'd be better off without me. And now I see you with her, and I realize what an idiot I was." The words came out more honestly than David had intended. "I see the way you look at her, the way she looks at you, and I understand what I threw away. Alex's expression shifted, surprise replacing anger. "You saw us together?" "Yesterday, at the building. I was there for a client meeting and I saw you leaving the cafe with Maria and Grace. I saw the way you were looking at each other, Alex. Like you'd found something you didn't know you were looking for." David paused, his voice growing quieter. "I've been thinking about them more lately. Grace's birthday was last month. She turned 9. I've been getting these pangs of guilt every year, but this time I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd missed." They stood in the kitchen, years of unspoken resentments hanging between them, but now with this new complication layered on top. David could see his brother struggling with conflicting emotions. Anger at David's abandonment of Grace and Maria, protectiveness toward both of them, and something that looked like guilt about his own feelings. "What do you want me to do?" David asked quietly. "I want you to grow up," Alex said bluntly. "I want you to take responsibility for your choices, and most importantly, I want you to think about what's best for Grace and Maria, not what's easiest for you." "And what about what you want?" David asked, watching his brother's face carefully. "What about Maria?" Alex was quiet for a long moment. "What I want doesn't matter if it's not what's best for them," he said finally. "Grace deserves the chance to know her father if that's what she wants. And Maria." He paused, his voice softening. "Maria deserves to make her own choices about her future, without pressure from either of us." The nobility of it made David feel even worse about his own motivations. Here was Alex, clearly falling in love with Maria, willing to step aside if it meant doing right by his family. And here was David, motivated more by jealousy and wounded pride than genuine desire to be a father. "I want to meet her," David said quietly. "Properly, I mean. Actually meet my daughter, and I want to try to make things right with Maria." "That's not up to you," Alex said firmly. "That's up to Maria. And given how you've treated her, I wouldn't blame her if she never wants to see you again. Will you ask her, will you help me try to make this right?" Alex studied his brother's face, looking for sincerity beneath the charm David had always used to escape consequences. What he found was genuine remorse, real pain, and perhaps the beginning of actual maturity. But underneath it all, Alex could also see something else: competition. David wasn't just asking for a chance to know his daughter, he was asking for a chance to win back the woman Alex was falling in love with. "I'll ask," Alex said finally. "But Dave, understand something. Grace and Maria are my family now. If you do anything to hurt them, if you disappoint that little girl, or cause Maria one moment of unnecessary pain, I will personally make sure you regret it." The threat was delivered quietly, but David didn't doubt for a second that Alex meant every word. "And understand something else," Alex continued, his voice even quieter. "I'm not going to step aside just because you're Grace's biological father. Maria and I, what's developing between us is real. If she chooses me, if she wants to build a life with me, I'm not going to walk away just to make things easier for you." The words were like a gauntlet thrown down between them. David nodded slowly, understanding that for the first time in their lives, they weren't just brothers, they were rivals. "I understand," David said. "And Alex, thank you for giving me a chance I probably don't deserve." "You're right," Alex said, heading toward the door. "You don't deserve it. But Grace deserves the chance to decide for herself what kind of relationship she wants with her father. That's the only reason I'm willing to help." As David left the penthouse, his mind was spinning with the magnitude of what lay ahead. For the first time in his adult life, he was going to have to face the consequences of his choices without charm or excuses to protect him. He was going to have to figure out how to be someone's father, and he was going to have to do it while competing with a brother who had already proven himself worthy of the family David had abandoned. Most challenging of all, He was going to have to win back the heart of a woman who had every reason to hate him, a woman who was already falling in love with someone else, someone better than him. The playground in Central Park was alive with the sounds of children's laughter and rustling autumn leaves. But Grace Santos sat quietly on a bench beside her mother, her small hands folded in her lap as she watched other families enjoying the Sunday afternoon. She'd been unusually quiet since Alex had called that morning, asking if they could meet at the park. Alex had been different on the phone, more serious, more careful with his words. Something had happened since their coffee yesterday, something that had shifted the easy warmth between them into something more complicated. "Mama," Grace said finally, her voice careful, "is Alex really my uncle?" "Yes, sweetheart, he really is." Maria smoothed Grace's hair, which she'd braided with extra care that morning. "How do you feel about that?" Grace considered this seriously. "Happy, I think. I liked Alex when I met him. He was sad, but not mean sad, just hurt, sad. And he listened to me like grown-ups usually don't." She paused, swinging her legs from the bench. "Does this mean I have more family now?" "It means you have an uncle who cares about you very much," Maria said carefully. They'd talked about this at length the night before, but she wanted to make sure Grace understood without overwhelming her. "What about my daddy?" The question Maria had been dreading, delivered with Grace's characteristic directness. "What about him, honey?" "If Alex is my uncle, then my daddy must be Alex's brother, right?" Grace's logic was flawless and terrifying. "Is he coming too?" Maria felt her heart clench. She'd spent the night awake, thinking about Alex, the way he'd looked at her across that cafe table, the electricity she'd felt when he'd taken her hand, the promise in his eyes that spoke of something deeper than family obligation. "Yes, your daddy is Alex's brother," Maria said slowly, "and yes, he might want to meet you. But Grace, I need you to understand something important." Grace turned to face her mother fully, her brown eyes serious and attentive. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," Maria continued, "big mistakes that hurt people they love. Your daddy made a mistake when you were little. He got scared and ran away when he should have stayed to take care of us. Like Mr. Whiskers did when that big dog came in the alley." Maria almost smiled despite the gravity of the conversation. "Yes, kind of like that. Except Mr. Whiskers came back when he was ready, and your daddy, well, he's been gone for a long time, but now he wants to come back. I don't know, sweetheart, maybe, but if he does, I want you to know that you don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. You don't have to forgive him, you don't have to call him daddy, you don't even have to like him if you don't want to." Grace swung her legs thoughtfully. "Do you think he's sorry?" "I don't know that either, but Grace, whether he's sorry or not, doesn't change who you are or how much you're worth. You are amazing, kind, intelligent, and any father would be lucky to have you." "What about Alex?" Grace asked, and something in her tone made Maria look at her sharply. "Do you like Alex, Mama? Like really like him?" The question caught Maria off guard. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "You looked different yesterday when you came home from coffee with him. Happy different, and you kept checking your phone like you were hoping he'd call." Grace's observational skills were sharp as ever. "Plus, you're wearing your pretty dress today, the blue one you only wear for special occasions." Maria felt heat rise in her cheeks. Trust Grace to notice everything. "Alex is. He's a very nice man, and he's going to be your uncle, so it's important that we all get along." "But that's not what I asked," Grace pointed out with relentless logic. "I asked if you like him, because I think he likes you. A lot." Before Maria could respond, she spotted Alex walking toward them across the park, and her heart did that fluttering thing it had been doing since yesterday. But as he got closer, Maria noticed he wasn't alone. There was another man with him, younger and somehow familiar, though she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. This man was handsome in the way movie stars were handsome, with the same dark hair as Alex, but a less serious expression. And as he approached, Maria felt a chill of recognition that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Grace felt her mother tense beside her, and suddenly she understood who the stranger must be. "Hello, Grace," Alex said as he reached them, his voice warm but carefully controlled. "How are you feeling today?" "Good," Grace said, though she was studying the man beside Alex with curious eyes. "Is this—" "Grace," Alex said gently, and Maria could hear the protective undertone in his voice. "This is my brother David, your father." The words hung in the air like a held breath. Grace looked at David, really looked at him, taking in his nervous expression, the way his hands fidgeted at his sides, the fact that he seemed to be waiting for her to make the first move. But Maria was staring at David too, and Alex could see the complex emotions playing across her face: recognition, old pain, anger, and something that might have been the ghost of old feelings. David was looking at Maria with an expression that made Alex's chest tighten with possessive jealousy. "Hi," Grace said finally, her voice polite but cautious. "Hi, Grace." David's voice was rougher than he'd intended, thick with emotions he wasn't sure how to process. You're beautiful. You look like your mother." Grace tilted her head, considering him with that direct gaze that seemed to see everything. "Alex says you've been gone for a long time." "Yes, I have." David knelt down so he was at Grace's eye level, a gesture that seemed to cost him considerable effort. "Grace, I need to tell you something important. I made a very big mistake when you were little. I got scared and I left when I should have stayed to take care of you and your mama." Why were you scared?" Grace asked, and Maria was struck by how much her daughter sounded like a therapist asking exactly the right question. David was quiet for so long that Grace began to wonder if he'd heard her. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I didn't know how to be a daddy. I was young and selfish, and I thought it would be easier to run away than to try and fail." "But you didn't even try," Grace pointed out matter-of-factly. "Mama says you can't fail at something you never attempt." The observation hit David like a physical blow. Here was his daughter, 9 years old and already wiser than he'd been at 21, calmly dissecting his biggest failure with clarity he'd spent years avoiding. "You're absolutely right," he said, and Grace could see tears in his eyes. "I didn't try, and that was wrong. I hurt you and your mama, and I'm sorrier than I know how to say." But even as he said it, David's gaze kept drifting to Maria, and Alex could see the complex emotions playing out on his brother's face. This wasn't just about making amends with Grace. This was about Maria too, and the feelings David clearly still had for her. Maria, for her part, was watching this interaction with carefully controlled emotions. Alex could see her maternal protectiveness warring with old hurt, but underneath it all, he caught glimpses of something else. A softness when she looked at David that spoke of shared history, of feelings that had never been properly resolved. Grace studied David's face with the same intensity she'd brought to helping Alex in the stairwell. She could see that he was genuinely upset, that his regret was real, but she could also see something else, a kind of weakness that made her feel protective of her mother rather than sympathetic toward him. "Are you going to leave again?" she asked bluntly. David started, then stopped. Grace could see him struggling with how to answer, and she realized he wasn't sure himself. "I think," Grace said carefully, looking between David and Alex and her mother, "that maybe you should figure out the answer to that question before we talk anymore." The adults around her stared in shock. This 9-year-old had just delivered one of the most mature and insightful responses any of them had ever heard. "Grace is right," Alex said quietly, though his voice was tight with emotions he was trying to control. "Dave, maybe you should think about what you actually want here and what you're prepared to give before we continue this conversation." But David was looking at Maria now, really looking at her. and the expression on his face made Alex's heart sink. "Maria," David said softly, "could we talk? Alone." Maria looked between David and Alex could see her struggling with the decision. Part of him wanted to object, to claim prior rights based on his growing feelings for her. But the larger part of him, the part that truly cared about her happiness, knew that she needed to face this conversation with David without pressure from him. "Okay," Maria said quietly. "Grace, why don't you and Alex go get some ice cream? We'll be right here." As Alex walked away with Grace, his niece's small hand in his crutch tapping rhythmically on the park path, he couldn't help but turn back to watch Maria and David together. They sat close on the bench, their heads bent toward each other in intimate conversation, and Alex felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Uncle Alex?" Grace's voice was thoughtful. "Are you worried about Mama and my daddy talking?" Alex looked down at this perceptive child. "A little," he admitted. "You like Mama a lot, don't you?" Grace asked as they approached the ice cream cart. "Like more than just friends?" The directness of the question caught Alex off guard, but looking into Grace's knowing eyes, he decided on honesty. "Yes, I do." "Good," Grace said with satisfaction. "Because Mama likes you too a lot, but she's scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of letting someone new into our life who might leave." Grace accepted her ice cream cone and looked back toward the bench, where her parents were still deep in conversation. "But you won't leave, will you, Uncle Alex?" "Never," Alex said firmly, and he meant it. Whatever happened between him and Maria, Grace would always be his niece, always be part of his life. "Then Mama will figure it out," Grace said, with the confidence of a child who trusted the adults in her life to make the right decisions. "She's really smart. She'll know who really loves her and who's just sorry he got caught." The wisdom in those words made Alex's chest tighten with something that might have been hope. As they walked back toward the bench, ice cream in hand, Alex caught sight of Maria and David's conversation. Maria was crying, and David was reaching for her hand, but Alex noticed that she pulled away. When they reached the bench, David stood quickly, his face flushed with what looked like embarrassment and frustration. "I should go," he said, looking at Grace with an expression that was equal parts regret and something that might have been relief. "Grace, would it be okay if I wrote you a letter, not asking for anything, just telling you about myself, and maybe you could think about whether you might want to get to know me someday?" Grace considered this seriously, then nodded. "I like letters, but I think you should figure out what you really want first. Do you want to be my daddy because you missed me, or because you feel bad?" She glanced meaningfully at her mother. Mama says grown-ups sometimes get confused about their feelings. The question was so astute that David actually stepped back. This child saw everything, understood dynamics that most adults missed. "I'll think about that," he said quietly. "And Grace, your mama did an amazing job raising you. You're incredible." As David walked away across the park, Grace watched him go with the same thoughtful expression she'd worn when first meeting Alex. "What do you think?" Alex asked, settling onto the bench beside Grace and Maria. "I think," Grace said slowly, "that he's confused about what he wants. But I don't think he's ready to be anybody's daddy yet. And how do you feel about that?" Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at Alex with a smile that transformed her entire face. "I feel like I already have the family I need," she said. "Mom and I have been fine together, and now we have you too. If my daddy wants to be part of that someday, when he's really ready, then maybe that could be nice. But if he doesn't, that's okay too." Alex found himself amazed once again by this remarkable child's wisdom and emotional maturity. But more than that, he was aware of Maria sitting beside him, quiet and thoughtful after her conversation with David. "Maria," he said softly, Are you okay?" She turned to look at him, and Alex was relieved to see that while her eyes were red from crying, there was something settled in her expression, something resolved. "He asked me to give him another chance," she said quietly, "to try again as a family." Alex felt his heart stop. And I told him that some chances only come once, that he made his choice 8 years ago, and I've made mine since then. Maria's voice grew stronger. "I told him that I'm not the same scared 21-year-old he left behind, and he's not the man I need in my life now." The relief that flooded through Alex was so profound, he felt dizzy. "Maria, I also told him something else," she continued, her cheeks flushing pink. "I told him that I'm falling in love with someone else. Someone who showed up when we needed him, who sees Grace for the amazing person she is, who makes me remember what it feels like to want something for myself again." Alex's breath caught. "Maria, are you saying—" "I'm saying that Grace was right yesterday when she said you have kind eyes," Maria said, turning to face him fully. "I'm saying that when you took my hand in that cafe, I felt something I haven't felt in 8 years. I'm saying that when I watch you with Grace, I see the kind of man I always hoped would be part of our lives." Alex felt something shift permanently in his chest, a settling into place of something he hadn't even known was missing. "I love you," he said simply. "Both of you. I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but Maria, I love you." "I love you too," she whispered, and when Alex leaned in to kiss her, it felt like coming home. Grace, who had been watching this entire exchange with obvious satisfaction, cleared her throat pointedly. "Does this mean Alex is going to be my new daddy?" Alex and Maria broke apart, both of them laughing at Grace's matter-of-fact question. "Well," Alex said, looking at Grace seriously, "I'd like to be, if that's okay with you. I know I can't replace your biological father, but I'd love to be the dad who's here for school plays and homework help and teaching you to drive someday." "I'd like that," Grace said, throwing her arms around his neck. "I'd like that a lot." Indeed, as the sun set over Central Park, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, the Santos family, now expanded to include one grateful uncle who was about to become something much more, headed home together. They carried with them the kind of love that makes miracles possible and proves that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose to create. 6 months later, at a Christmas wedding in Alex's Connecticut house, Grace would serve as maid of honor while wearing a dress the exact color of her mother's eyes. David would send a thoughtful gift and a letter apologizing for missing the ceremony, explaining that he was volunteering with underprivileged children in Guatemala, and finally learning what it meant to put others first. And as Alex and Maria exchanged vows in front of a small gathering of friends and family, Grace would whisper to her new grandmother that she'd known from the moment she met Alex in that stairwell that he was going to be part of their family forever. After all, she'd tell anyone who would listen. She was very good at recognizing miracles when she saw them.